I was talking with a friend about the phenomenon that was 2020, and we were talking specifically about people we had met during the quarantine versus friends we had before the pandemic. And we realized they're pretty different types of friends. Why is that? We've had to learn an entirely new dance with people, a new method of communicating, different ways to get through our daily lives. The old world is gone, and the new world is here, whether we want it to be or not. March 2020, things changed forever. The entirety of that year will go down in history books as the pandemic of our lifetime. Unemployment skyrocketed. People struggled to pay rent, to feed their families. COVID killed over 2 million people across the world. Small businesses everywhere struggled to survive, and many didn't. Students of all ages had to learn remotely, which was an experience, by the way, that none of us could relate to, because the last time a pandemic like this happened, it was in 1918 and there were no computers. We saw a lot of our society split in half, some waking up like that rebirth scene from The Matrix to the reality of systemic racism that's been happening for hundreds of years, and some, encouraged by the tyrant in office, uncovered their internal racism, homophobia, and transphobia for all of us to see. And all of these things trickled down to one main funnel. Anybody know what it is? Our mental health. New anxieties, uncovered traumas, mental illnesses all started to bloom. And to many of us, it felt like it was all at once. Our roots and the soil around them were shaken. Our lives had slowed down just enough that we were no longer able to dismiss or ignore the issues that so badly needed attention. When the world stopped, we were forced to sit in uncomfortable places with ourselves, and we had to either grow and change or get dragged. Some of the major takeaways from this year in quarantine that I've heard from people have been that they learned that they could survive alone, and even more, they could thrive. Some were finally able to leave an abusive relationship or end a toxic friendship, and some learned that they had a lot of unhealed things from their past that they just didn't have time to focus on until now. The poem Love After Love by Derek Walcott speaks to this so beautifully when he says, "Give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart." So many of us reconnected with that long-lost best friend in ourselves during 2020. We started moving new muscles in our healing and bettering ourselves in order to center our needs, some of us for the first time ever. So now we are posed with this question. How do we unpack these new feelings or blooms that have come up in ourselves? Unpacking is painful and messy. No wonder people don't want to do it. In 2019, we lost one person to suicide every 40 seconds. In 2020, one person every 20 seconds. And as of June of last year, 40% of all adults reported they were struggling with mental illness or substance abuse. The pandemic has taught so many of us that we can survive hard things. It's a pivotal moment when we realize that healing is not just messy, but also nowhere close to being linear. When we realize that there is no forward and no backward in our journey. What the world classifies as a mistake, a failed boundary, or a relapse is really just part of the entire healing process. In plant metaphors, it's like we have dead leaves or unhealthy branches. We try to see if we can make them work, even bring them back to life. It's a valiant effort, but those leaves are in fact part of our process and journey, and not things to bring us shame, but rather things to thank for their service, remove, and then fill that space with new energy. They're triggers. And a trigger is a reminder that there is something to work on, a trauma root to dig up. They are painful. And when we reach them, they feel like they could ruin us. So does trauma have power to ruin you over time? Well, it's trauma. It's a horrible event that happened to you. But what makes it stick around? Why does it sometimes stop your healing? Trauma's BFF is stigma, also known as shame. Those two work hand in hand, finding our most vulnerable moments and then dig underneath them where we are raw and unhealed and sideswipe us when we least expect it with shame. How can you process your traumas in real time and speak about them outside of your head to keep that shame at bay and help you heal? I want to show you an example of how that safe space can help someone see their trauma differently and create a place for them within themselves that they can begin to heal. This is Autumn. She was 15 in this photo. She sat in front of my camera and admitted to me that she had a suicide plan for the following week. Her mom, a former classmate of mine from high school, was sitting right out in the hall with no idea. My heart broke for her. She cried and told me about grieving a dear friend who had jumped off the bridge in their small town a few months earlier. She felt like her school and her fellow students didn't care about the tragic death, and she just wanted to be with her friend. I sobbed along with her while shooting these photos. We connected with our similar traumas, and it helped her reach deep and dig into her sadness. She unzipped her heart and left it in a messy but brave ball on the floor of that photo studio. At one point, I asked her how she dealt with her sadness, if she had any outlets. And she told me she loved to draw. Autumn pulled out a portfolio, and what I saw took my breath away. Each piece was laced with her pain and sadness, beautiful characters with exposed ribs, arrows in their hearts, ripped open chest cavities, and beautiful nature interwoven through it all. She was creating grief art as therapy, and she didn't even realize it. A few months later, Autumn checked in with me and said sharing her story, getting it out into the fresh air, having total strangers hold the space for her, helped her move through it so much easier. Autumn now had the space and capacity to use her art as a way to continue to process her grief. It's been 3 years, and she is now doing commissioned work for people and illustrating graphic novels. Autumn had a peer-based, judgment-free, safe space to offload and share her trauma. No stigmas existed in that world. No one was paid to be there, and no one was a professional mental health worker. It was the idea of a completely neutral space to just listen and feel. Imagine the mental space you could free up if you could express your thoughts and feelings in real time. If you had the freedom and safety to remove all the things that are holding space in your body, nesting and seeding shame, weaving their roots around space and energy that you need to help you grow. At the beginning of this quarantine, when I was unpacking a few pretty large traumas, my therapist decided it was the perfect time to have a baby and go on maternity leave. The audacity. So I had to create some steps to work through things myself. And the following are the steps I discovered to help unearth and use our traumas as fuel. Number 1 is sit and dig. That sit in it phrase has been thrown around a lot in our counsel culture, but we need to go past sitting. We have to find the courage to dig. People don't like to dig. It's messy. It can be like picking off a scab because you're digging into wounds that previously may have even felt healed. Shame covers them. They hide them and give them no voice. Brene Brown said shame derives its power from being unspeakable. So we have to dig to find its roots before we can give it a voice. Number 2, unearth those roots. Dust off that dirt. Make sure you get the entire root. When I was a kid, my parents used to make us weed the yard, and they were very clear with us about making sure we got the entire root, or else the plant would regenerate and grow right back. We have to dig up the entire root of this feeling, no matter how hard it is, so it doesn't grow back. Number 3, how does it bloom? Seeds are planted, they grow roots, and then they bloom above ground. In this case, our bodies. How does shame bloom in you? What does it look like when you're feeling it? For some people, it may be guilt, humiliation, sadness, even anger. I want you to describe it more for me. What color are the petals and leaves? Do you feel it in your chest? Does your stomach get upset? Or is it all cerebral? Maybe your face gets flush and your heart rate speeds up. Whatever it is, we have to find that feeling in order to be able to name it and unpack it. Step 4 is prune and deadhead. So, a little known fact, plants will continue to send nourishment to dead appendages, not accepting the death, and in essence, deprive the rest of themselves from the nutrients needed to stay healthy. This means remove what is no longer serving you. If there is something or someone that you are giving your energy to that is toxic, remove it, deadhead it. Your emotional energy is valuable and should go to helping you grow and not feeding toxic things and people. Step 5 is nutrients and patience. If a plant shrivels because of lack of water or sunlight, it happens so fast. But the bounce back isn't as fast. It takes time. Time to settle back into the earth. Time for the energy to revolve around the soil, get into the roots, and go back up the stems and breathe new life into that space. This means we cannot expect results overnight. Slowly nourish, care for, and send energy to the places of yourself that need care. And be kind with your bounce back timeline. Your patience with yourself is such an important nutrient. Your understanding that you are indeed fallible and need time and space to heal, that is better than any mulch on the market. And the last step is know the rhythm of the seasons. Know the rhythm of a trauma conversation. Why do you think we don't have safe spaces like this for ourselves and others? Partially because these 5 steps covered are not easy, but also because most of us don't know how to properly create a safe rhythm in these conversations. Trauma is heavy to talk about. It can be triggering for people, whether you're speaking at an event like this or confiding in a friend about something you've never spoken out loud before. The average person can only handle about 7 to 8 minutes of a heavy trauma topic before their bodies and brains go into protection mode. We need to learn to give our storytelling process and discussions around these topics time to breathe. Space for levity. Your listener needs to feel like they also have a safe space to absorb your story at their own pace so they can be the best support system for you possible. Remember to always try to build in moments to just be, breathe. And to remember, the objective of these safe spaces is for them to be safe for all parties involved. So knowing the rhythm of a tough conversation, reading the room and the seasons can really help you keep your safe space healthy. The path to healing is not linear. No one's growth is the same, and no one's process or pain can be compared. We must always remember that part of the safe space is remembering that no one is fighting the exact same battle. We aren't broken. We aren't victims. We aren't hurt in need of repair. We instead have been moved, shifted, tested. And while we can't control what happened to us, we can control how we react and process it. We can be the captains of our own trajectories. Society wants to see us struggle over our trauma. They want those dramatic stories to create needs all around us and essentially make us think we cannot stand up on our own. But this pandemic and how we have been forced into being uncomfortable is proof that we can be alone and we can begin to heal there. I am here to tell you that standing and growing in the midst of pain is absolutely possible. Today, I want you to not be afraid to dig. Dig past the uncomfortable level, just below the surface, where the dirt isn't easy to get into, where it's difficult. Dig where the worms and roly-poly bugs are. Dig to where the soil reaches toward the core of the earth and the dirt starts to fall back into the hole on top of itself, almost like it's telling you it's too deep. Turn back. That's how you know you're getting to the roots. And when you find them, remember, don't pull, don't break them. Gently wrap your energy around them, coaxing them out of the compacted earth, showing them warmth, patience, and direction. It's in that moment, whether you realize it or not, you have taken your pain and its power back for yourself. And you have found one of the most powerful and untapped forms of organic fuel for growth in the palm of your hands. You are not at rock bottom. You have just been planted.